Hello and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where, oh boy, are we about to have a discussion. I know a lot of you are relishing this, wondering if I'm going to go there. Oh, I'm going to go there. So buckle up, get the popcorn, all that jazz. So yes, a traditional studio did manage to hold the line, just barely, and we'll see what Monday's final numbers look like. But it looks like a traditional studio picture was still able to claim the #1 spot this weekend. But you are looking at some significant cracks in Tinseltown's hold on the entertainment business. This is a really big deal. How much longer can Hollywood be dismissive of fans, largely male fans and conservatives, before they lose them forever? Some of you might be like, who cares? Let them go. Well, don't pull a Kathleen Kennedy. Let's talk about it. And what's more, while Hollywood beforehand was losing large chunks of its audience, they were going to other forms of entertainment. So Hollywood could be like, well, how are we supposed to compete with video games and social media, etc.? But now, the call is coming from inside the house, the movie house. That's right, YouTuber Mark Fischbach, aka Markiplier, who I've never heard of before this week. There's a couple of things here. He self-distributed his own movie, and he wanted it in theaters. I think it's interesting. He still wanted that validation of having a movie in theaters, but he could have released it on YouTube. He could have gone directly to digital, but he decided he wanted to be in the theater. I think he wanted that, there's some value, I think, still in the communal experience. I've told you for a while now that movie theaters are heading towards event status. It's becoming more of an event. But anyway, he self-distributed, and talk about tearing down the establishment. Before, if you managed to claw your way up to a certain level outside of the system, you then came knocking on the system's door. Hello, Hollywood, can I come in? And Hollywood would decide whether or not they wanted to let you in. Even Mr. Beast is over on Amazon. But no, in this case, Hollywood was totally circumvented. And make no mistake, while of course Taylor Swift is partially responsible for this, so is Hollywood itself, because they were supplying such poor product to theaters that theaters became desperate to make a buck any way they could. And exhibitors, which is the industry term for theater owners, they stopped protecting their partner because they felt they were no longer partners. CinemaCon, which is the convention where studios meet with theater owners to promote the upcoming year, to try and get theater owners to want to book the movies, etc. It's going to be interesting. Last year, Universal's Donna Langley literally told theaters to clean up their act. She said you need to provide a better experience. But we know what that means. We know all the laundry list of problems with the theater going to a movie in theaters. But then how do you explain this? People were still willing to go. So there's going to be a lot of finger pointing at CinemaCon. It's your fault. No, it's your fault. I think it's both your fault, guys. It's slipping through your fingers. And we're going to dig into all of it right now. But yes, Disney Fox's Send Help, a survivalist horror comedy, just barely managed to come out on top. However, unlike in Send Help, we're not stuck on a deserted island, forced to forage for our own food. No, we enjoy all the benefits of civilization. But on that note, if you're not taking advantage of the latest that civilization has to offer, well, that's not very civilized. For instance, it used to be if you wanted your food fast, it was either unhealthy or it tasted awful. You had to choose between the two. But not anymore. That's because our friends at Factor will deliver healthy and delicious, fresh, never frozen meals directly to your door, like Korean-style salmon, Tex-Mex burger bowl, chicken shawarma salad. Those salads are new. And then also this little beauty right here. It smells so good. Shredded chicken taco bowl. This was ready in just 2 minutes in the office microwave. Now, for the past couple of months, as you know, I've had to be relocated to this office, and I have learned that it is oh so tempting to eat out every day for lunch. But not only is that really bad for you, but it gets kind of expensive. So I bring a Factor meal to work with me every day, and I pop it in the office fridge until it's lunchtime. And you know what? Because, even in civilization, especially in the office, it can still be a jungle out there. puts my name on it. Don't eat my factory meal. This is my lunch, man. Get your own. And you can, thanks to this amazing deal from Factor. So you head to factor75.com or click on the link right down below and use code BTTFB50 to get 50% off your first Factor box plus free breakfast for an entire year. Oh my goodness. I don't know how long Factor is going to be offering this amazing deal. So you might want to jump on it while you still can. So that's code BTTFB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off your first Factor box plus that free breakfast for an entire year. And thanks again to Factor for sponsoring another episode of Movie Math. I'm honored they like the show. I feed your mind, they feed your stomach. Or, maybe Markiplier could get some Factor meals delivered to him down in that iron lung. Yeah, as I said, those ad spots have to be filmed a little bit in advance for approval. As I said, iron lung wasn't even on my radar when I was putting that together. I didn't even know it existed until last Movie Math. Some of you were like, why aren't you mentioning iron lung for movies that are coming out this coming week? And I was like, what is that? And then I saw it was a YouTuber movie, and I was like, by the way, I forgot to put it in here, but I'll just mention it now. Why didn't Chris Stuckman get this kind of blow up? I still believe, as many do, that it was his fateful decision to stop doing negative reviews. A year, I think actually a little bit more than a year, in advance of his film's release. And he just completely torpedoed his audience and therefore went into his movie's release with a much weaker fan base. And I think that had a real effect. Also, apparently the movie wasn't any good, but I do think that was a huge factor as to why his movie didn't materialize. He ended up not being a true outsider, and you don't get much more of an outsider than it seems Markiplier. All right, so yeah, like Dylan O'Brien, Hollywood finds itself facing off against two Linda Littles. If you see Send Help, it's very funny because this is very much what's actually happening to Hollywood to a degree. So you've got young men and conservatives, right? And also like O'Brien, Hollywood would be foolish to underestimate these foes. So Send Help and Iron Lung are actually sort of similar, right? Tonally. And you could make an argument that Sam Raimi, with his own low-budget horror origins, was kind of like the Markiplier of his day, except he didn't also star. He had Bruce Campbell for that, right? But both movies are blood-soaked extravaganzas, and younger men went to see Iron Lung, and older men went to see Send Help. Isn't that interesting, right? They kind of divided the audience up amongst themselves, and probably both could have done better if they hadn't opened it opposite each other. I think that Disney Fox never saw Iron Lung coming, and I think Markiplier, while he clearly knows his audience very well, doesn't know the Hollywood business very well and shouldn't have. Well, his movie did very well, but I don't know if this was the best weekend to open it, to be honest with you. But I mean, again, it did very well, but it's interesting, right? Okay. What's also interesting is that both movies leaned kind of white. Typically Caucasian demos are in the 40th percentile range. And if they're anywhere above that, they're not doing as well with diverse audiences as let's say, a strong movie would. The name of the game is to get as many people in to see your movie as possible. All right, Iron Lung, not for me. I'm not the target audience for that, but it's doing so well. I was like, well, let me see the trailer. Do I think maybe I want to watch this? And I watched the trailer and I was like, no, I don't want to watch that. But business hat on, I was struck by the final line of the trailer, where Markiplier's character says, I just want to live. Is that so wrong? Why doesn't anybody else want that? And I was like, whoa, I bet there are a lot of people, again, particularly young men, who feel that way right now. And Markiplier is tapping into that. I think in many ways, serious ways, more trivial commercial ways. Like, I think that a lot of young men feel that nobody cares about them right now, but Markiplier does. So we're going to talk about that. So as I'm saying, Hollywood can keep being dismissive of that demographic feeling left out. Thanks a lot, Kathleen Kennedy. Kathleen Kennedy is also sort of responsible for a lot of this. And the Democrats are also ignoring that same sentiment. But for those of you, again, who are like, let them. Look at the results. You can't be happy with this. That dismissiveness lost the presidency. It was close. When it's that close, you can't lose anybody. And now Hollywood, a very powerful tool, which has been in the hands of liberals since this Hollywood was founded, is starting to slip away as well. Recently, people have been noting, and some sounding the alarm, that conservative billionaires are swooping in and buying up entertainment, social media, and perhaps even news companies. CNN is on the sales block, and a lot of people are kicking the tires. We'll see what happens there. I don't even know if CNN will continue at all. We'll see. What do you think? I don't know if there's any value there anymore. Would you buy CNN? I don't know. Elon Musk was apparently kicking the tires, but he already has X. All right, but anyway, sure, there are all those billionaires, but then how do you explain Mark Fischbach? Sure, he certainly pulls in a couple of million off of his YouTube channel. He's one of the top earners, in fact, on this service. But he's no Musk, Bezos, or Ellison. But he's starting to amass his fortune and picking up steam. Although, let's see how many movies he releases. Is this going to be a normal thing, or is it just, again, we'll see. This new territory. But Iron Lung was made for just $3 million with almost no advertising budget, because with his huge following on YouTube and his social media channels, he just has to post his trailers and posters to get attention for the film. So he's making a ton of money off of Iron Lung. Look at the worldwide. He's gotten even more money there. And a small cut of it, though, is, of course, going, it starts out small and gets bigger the longer Iron Lung plays in theaters, which I don't suspect will be very long. I think it's going to be very front-loaded, which means Markiplier will get most of the money. But the theaters get all the concession sales, and they get a small cut of those ticket sales. And I'm sure they're thrilled to take it. Yes, exhibitors with AMC Theaters leading this charge are definitely thinking outside the box when it comes to getting butts in their seats, and clearly are willing to consider any proposal. I think they'll put anything in the theater at this point if you think you can bring in an audience, especially after this. They'll be like, how many people do you think you got? Sure, we'll give you a couple of screens. And this is where I think it gets even more interesting. I think the rise of anime movies is also similar to what's going on with Iron Lung. I think very similar audience. And while Markiplier had to forge his own path here, he's like, I'll self-distribute. And that's, you got to figure out how to do that. You better believe that theater owners and maybe even YouTube itself are not going to try and make that something easier to do, right? Imagine you can just publish a video on YouTube. What if you could publish a movie in theaters on AMC? I don't think it'll be something that's available to everybody, but I think it'll be easier than, the hoops that Taylor Swift and now Markiplier have had to jump through. It would be stupid for these companies not to facilitate that. Although I don't know what other YouTube channels do you think could open a movie at the level that Markiplier just did? I bet Mr. Beast is kicking himself for going to Amazon. He should have self-published, but he wanted that legitimacy. That's very interesting. It's never too late, Mr. Beast. Ironically, though, Netflix is trying to turn into YouTube, which it turns out, look at this recent chart that was released, YouTube is the most watched streaming service in the world. Huzzah! All right, so with wildcards and AI quickly advancing, not only are gatekeepers being torn down, but all the rules and orders seem to be disappearing. So are we going to head, as Peter Venkman said, are we headed towards mass hysteria? Now, I'm sure a number of you so far in this video have been like, what's the problem here, Grace? This is fantastic. Well, let's think about where we might be headed. So if entertainment comes from anyone, anywhere, how does anyone make any money doing that, right? How can unions, for instance, make sure that everyone gets their fair share and is treated fairly in a world where it's just everyone's just running amok, right? And sure, Markiplier made a lot of money this weekend, but what does the next weekend look like? Can he do it again? And one of the reasons he was able to make so much money is because the theater circuit does exist. But what if by the release of this movie, we're on the path of tearing that down next, right? Look what happened to the music industry. And the music industry is still doing okay, although I don't think it looks that much different than what it did. It's not like it hasn't quite, I don't know. That guy from Joe Keery from Stranger Things seems to have self-released his own song and done quite well. That's because he's in Stranger Things. But, for all the dystopian things that happened in the music business there for a while, it still looks pretty much the same. So we'll see. But yeah, I think that, I think gatekeeping is very bad, and Hollywood has gone off the rails with gatekeeping. But I do think that rules and order are important. I personally think that if Markiplier had teamed up with Hollywood, that would have resulted in a better and more professional product that maybe could have had a bigger audience out of the gate and maybe would do well in theaters for a longer amount of time. Maybe Markiplier would have expanded his audience, but he might not be interested in that. Hey, he just walked home with at least 20 million. So he's like, I'm good. But yes, but this is where we are, right? Because but I think that, should Markiplier have teamed up with Hollywood, et cetera, it doesn't speak to another element in play here. And that's that a lot of people are so upset right now. They would rather watch something that's unprofessional and not that great, right? It's not, so I don't think it's the level. I mean, again, I haven't seen it, but I certainly don't think it's the level of quality of a Hollywood film, right? I think the reviews might be a little bit harsh, but I think the reviews are one extreme and I think the audience score is the other extreme, right? But people are like, I'd rather watch this not as good piece of content because the person on screen is who I want to support. I think that's how people are feeling. A lot of people. Markiplier and Melania, these two people, the audiences that went to see these movies feel that Markiplier and Melania respect them and reflect them. And they would rather watch this not as good content instead of giving Hollywood another dime, a place that they've come to believe hates them and is nothing like them. And that is, I think, what's a big factor here. But before outside groups claim victory, remember that the game, as I just said, is always rigged. TikTok might have the most views of any platform, but it pays the least of any platform. And same for Twitter. When Twitter launched, the fact that it would pay you for tweets, there are these big numbers that were going out, and yet nobody talks about big numbers anymore. Not to say there aren't maybe a few individuals, but I guarantee you the people making the most money there, well, in any case, but I think, so we have to ask ourselves, is a new industry being built or are we just burning everything to the ground? I think that is a genuine concern. All right, now, I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts on that. All right, so let's talk Melania. As the trades have pointed out, it's not like Melania was selling out across the country, right? Because with the release that it had in this number of theaters, if it was selling out all of its shows, it would have opened with around 30, which, by the way, is more than Send Help or Iron Lung did, right? I'm not to say some shows didn't sell out here and there. I'm sure there are a couple of you are like, my theater was sold out. That's great, but not every theater was. But it's not like the Melania theaters were empty either. Now, there was this ad on Craigslist, a single ad out of Boston purporting to pay people to go see Melania, right? But nobody can prove if that's legit. And again, it was just an ad for one city where Melania didn't even do that well. If that would have been the number one performing city for the movie, then maybe you'd be like, well, maybe there's something there. There were also, of course, as I'm sure you've seen, screenshots of empty theaters going into Melania's release, but it turns out Melania had a lot of walk-up sales. So some of the seats in those theaters might have ended up selling legitimately. The trades are saying that there were about 600,000 tickets sold over the weekend for Melania, which is interesting in and of itself. I always tell you, you don't have to sell that many tickets to make a couple $1 million in Hollywood. There are 250 million adults in the United States, more than that, in fact. And yet not even 1 million went to see Melania, and it still opened at number 3 in theaters. So again, that's why some movies can just explode because they get more than 1 million people to go. That's the name. That's why you want a 4. But again, it's all about budget and ratio and stuff like that. Although we're going to talk about Melania's budget in just a second. But so who did go? Who went to see Melania, right? Well, it turns out it was older women in red states, with the documentary doing particularly well in a number of cities in Texas and Florida. And that tracks. That makes total sense. And it seems that they liked it. You can game the Rotten Tomatoes audience score, but cinema score is pretty hard to game. So that means there were people to ask if they liked Melania when they walked out of the theaters. And they did. They did say that they liked it. With both these movies, second weekend drops will be very important, right? And both movies will, I think, likely have big second weekend drops. If they don't, that's going to be an even bigger problem. And, we'll see. There's not a lot of competition this coming weekend. So they could actually hold up pretty well. But no matter what happens, they've already made, well, Markiplier just made a ton of money. And then with Melania, Jeff Bezos paid $40 million for the distribution rights for this film, way more than it costs to make the documentary. And then he spent an extra $35 million on top of that to make the whole thing seem legit. And he's never going to get that money back. But, with even this performance, even though this is very good for a documentary, nobody pays $40 million for a documentary, legitimately, because you can't make that money back in theaters. But here, I don't think Jeff Bezos was looking to make his money back. I think he was looking to make an investment. And I think that he's going to feel very happy about how that turned out. Now, speaking of plans, what's also interesting is that maybe with Melania's somewhat success, if Paramount can keep their budgets in check, maybe their game plan to be the conservative studio, they're making Rush Hour 4, for instance, with canceled director Brett Ratner, canceled for very good reasons, by the way, who directed Melania. And Trump is the one who said, please make Rush Hour 4. And Paramount said, the new management at Paramount said, okay, even though no other studio would. But maybe being the conservative studio, maybe there's some money to be made there. Although CBS, their first true experiment as this quasi-conservative company, is not going very well. So hopefully Paramount Movies goes better than Paramount News. But I do think they have an idiot running CBS News, and let's see if they have better people in the film division, film and TV. Although the decision they just made to pull the Aang movie from theaters and send it straight to Paramount Plus instead seems even stupider than it did before, and it seemed plenty stupid already in the wake of Iron Lung's success. When you see how the anime films have been doing in Iron Lung, I think, although Aang, of course, The Last Airbender is a lot more of a far more liberal franchise, but I still would have tried it. I think it's a huge mistake not to put that in theaters. So the final note I want to say about these outliers, okay, is that Kathleen Kennedy made a huge mistake, and it's a shame that other people took their cue from her in the movie business, because Hollywood's sweet spot for money has always been men, particularly young men, since the very beginning, and they're losing them. And again, I don't know if they'll be able to get them back. Do you think they can get them back? And how do you think they could go about doing that? I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on this, because I know a lot of you are on the front lines of this fight. I really liked Send Help. In fact, a lot of people like Send Help. Its critic and audience scores over on Rotten Tomatoes are very strong. Its cinema score is a little softer, and I think that's because, as an industry friend of mine pointed out, they saw the movie this weekend, we were talking about it, they said that this movie was way too gory for mainstream audiences, and I can see that. And so I think, maybe Sam Raimi was a little too Sam Raimi, perhaps. We'll see. But, the horror scene is on fire right now, so you think that would have worked in his favor, but clearly Iron Lung, as I said, took some big sips of Send Help's bloody milkshake. And that, again, is another issue. Let's look into that a little bit more. The studios, of course, are competitive, but respectfully competitive. At least they have been for the most part. As things get tougher, they might stop being so polite or respectful. For instance, we have the upcoming Doomsday situation where neither Disney or Warner Brothers looks like they're willing to blink, and I think that'll hurt both movies. But I think particularly Dune is going to have although it's taking the IMAX screens from Doomsday. That's a mess. But almost no studio would have put Iron Lung up against Send Help, which was already dated. But Markiplier don't care. He's not a part of the industry. Now, you would think Disney Fox might hold a grudge and be like, you torpedoed our movie, buddy. So hopefully Markiplier doesn't want to deal with Disney. I don't think he wants to deal with Disney Fox. I think he's very happy the way he is. But, on the other side, I think if he did call them up, I think that Hollywood might be eager to bring him into the fold rather than let him to continue to wreak havoc as a wild card, right? They might be like, we're kind of miffed, but we don't want this to happen again, so come on in. Clearly, a lot of you like to say the movie star is dead, I still feel Box Office Poison is very much alive. And I think that Rachel McAdams and Dylan O'Brien just can't sell tickets. The Send Help, the cast just wasn't compelling enough. And while Sam Raimi clearly has a fan base, that he's retained a fan base that has gotten older, he's doing a horrible job getting new fans. Because it seems that a lot of younger moviegoers or potential moviegoers know who Markiplier is, but they're not really into Sam Raimi. There have been some very disturbing articles lately about film appreciation, people not being able to get through movies, not knowing who famous directors and filmmakers are. It's pretty bad. It's like, I mean, apparently some people can't even read a book. It's a real problem. But, again, we're bringing it on ourselves. But anyway, that's a whole different conversation. But yeah, so newer audiences don't know who Sam Raimi is. So add to that Send Help has a strong feminist element to it, and it was a really poor choice to be Hollywood's combatant going into a crucial box office weekend like this. Another movie maybe could have done better and, crushed Iron Lung and Melania, but they went up against very weak competition. And that's really kind of the problem in a nutshell, right? Hollywood's like, we love Send Help. This is the kind of movie we want to make. Even though a lot of people have been screaming in Hollywood that they don't want to watch that movie. And so somebody finally said, well, I'll give you something to watch. And here's where we are. Oh yeah, Jason Statham sure got hit hard this weekend. Unusual for him, right? He's usually the winner of his fights. Because remember The Beekeeper? He used to be the outlier, but now he's old news compared to Markiplier and Melania, who Markiplier definitely drank Jason Statham's milkshake. Jason Statham might be asking Markiplier for a job in the near future, if not this very second. As for the rest of the top 10, look at Zootopia 2 Go. It hit digital this week. It's available at home. And yet it somehow still went up in the top 10. I think because of the snowstorm last week. But it went up. Just like horror, animation is really on fire right now as a genre. Whew, people are just cashing checks over there. It's no mistake that Markiplier made a horror movie. And by the way, I should have mentioned this, involved with video games. Markiplier hitting all the hot words. All right, so Avatar is closing in on that 1.5 billion that we've been seeing for a while now. It might go a tad over because it's still going okay. It didn't drop that much this weekend, but it's still not getting anywhere close to 2 billion. I think that the trades will wait another week or so to just be sure, and then you'll start to see a flood of articles as to why this third entry was unable to get into the $2 billion club like the last two. Just like they waited really long to talk about why Heated Rivalry isn't on the Nielsen charts, even though we've been discussing that for weeks now. So yeah, right now everybody's leaving Jimmy C alone, but he's going to have a lot of articles talking about how the movie didn't live up to expectations real soon. We'll see if they can goad him into saying something really bad. And also if he's going to hold that press conference or make Avatar 4. All right, I think one of you had a good idea. I asked you guys before what to do, and someone said, make Avatar 4, but wrap it up, Jimmy. Yeah, I wouldn't greenlight 2 more movies. I'd say make 1 more. I don't know, though. What if it came in much lower? It's a risk. I think there's a chance. I think there's a very strong chance. Although they're going to go to Earth, right, and have more humans. That'll make it very. I think one of the chief complaints about the new Avatar is that it's not much different than the last one, but that could be very different. I don't know. He's really going to roll the dice. And Jimmy C doesn't like to be embarrassed, so we'll see what he decides to do. Speaking of second weekend drops, just like we're looking to see what Iron Lung and Melania do, Mercy from Chris Pratt fell just 56% in its second weekend, which is not horrible. I mean, it's not great, but it's not horrible either. And so that's a good sign for Iron Lung and Melania's staying power, especially because there are no new big movies opening this weekend because it's the Winter Olympics and the Super Bowl. So ain't nobody want to open their movie against that unless they're going for a Hail Mary. Both The Housemaid and Marty Supreme will hit digital on Tuesday, but both continue to do very well in theaters and probably will continue to do so, even though they're hitting digital. But Bone Temple, whew! It's almost out of the top 10 already in just its third weekend, and it has only 23 million domestic. Worldwide, just 53. That's a mere third of what the last entry did. What a disaster. I think there's still a very strong chance that Sony decides not to move ahead with that next film. Now let's move over to streaming, starting with Nielsen as usual. They're, again, a month behind, so this is for the week of New Year's. And sure enough, with the Stranger Things series finale, Stranger Things 5 experienced its third and final surge in the viewership numbers. Although the trailer for its first spin-off, an animated series, drops tomorrow. Wow, that's so fast it'll give you whiplash. but we'll see right away if there was any damage done to the brand with the somewhat, maybe even very disappointing final season. Other franchises, they were so hot, but then they fell apart because of some very bad choices that they made. And so this will be an interesting test. Animation is popular, but it's more niche. So that might be we'll have to factor that in as well. Are you excited about the Stranger Things spinoff, or do you need a little break after Stranger Things 5? Landman's still going very strong. And so is Fallout, by the way. These Fallout numbers are very good. Very good. The season finale is this week, and we'll see if it can finally get some chatter online to go along with these fantastic numbers. Netflix also once again has a hit with adapting a Harlan Coben thriller. HBO's Casey Bloys had a big interview this past week, and he said the reason they haven't greenlit a second season of Welcome to Derry is that the Muschietis aren't ready. They're like, oh, don't greenlight our second season. We're still thinking about it. That's not how it works, right? I think they're just stalling. I still feel the impending Netflix Warner Brothers deal is the main factor there. But speaking of whether or not HBO Max shows can trend, Derry did trend at the very end, although, of course, we've seen a problem with Heated Rivalry. Some people have said, oh, well, it's a Canadian show. Well, Nielsen numbers are only for the United States, so that doesn't matter. It just puts it on the acquired chart. But anyway, there's The Pit. And, this was before season 2 even started. This was people catching up and getting ready for the start of season 2. Although, to be fair, The Pit is a juggernaut. It's 15. It's a 15 episode, and those are all 1 hour episodes, season, whereas most shows are only about 6 to 8 episodes. So on Nielsen, which is a numbers-driven chart, that really gives it an edge. But I'm excited to see what kind of numbers The Pit posts once season 2 gets started. Although, again, as we've been discussing, The Pit season 2 is far more political than season 1, and I am also curious to see what that does to its numbers. Emily in Paris, Percy Jackson, The Beast in Me, and Pluribus are all still holding on here. And Being a Binge worked very nicely for Peacock's The Copenhagen Test, a very badly needed win for Simu Liu and Melissa Barrera. After All Her Fault was also a successful binge, I think Peacock might go all in on the binge, whereas HBO, Disney+, Prime Video, and Apple continue with the weekly release model. All right, also here's the movies chart. Not too much interesting stuff happening over here. As for Netflix's charts for just last week, The Rip, not slowing down at all, posted another 40 million plus views, just like it did last week when it debuted. That's incredible. The Damon Affleck duo is still mighty potent, and they had one heck of a PR tour for this film. It reminds me of the magic of Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo's first PR tour. Very special. Ariana and Cynthia couldn't maintain that magic for round 2, but it was back-to-back. I think doing back-to-back movies is just seeming more and more like it was a huge mistake. But Affleck and Damon, they give us time to miss us. They go away, then they come back. They go away, they come back. But I think that this PR tour for The Rip was I really do feel it was one of the best I've ever seen, and it was up there with the first round of Cynthia and Ariana. All right, and then the Bond movies came to Netflix, and the Daniel Craig ones are the ones that have been able to chart. Not my favorites, though. I think my favorites are Skyfall and Casino Royale, and then I think these other two charted, which I think are the not as good ones. But anyway, they're the Daniel Craig entries, and he will be very hard to replace as Bond, I think. Rumors are now swirling that it might be Jacob Elordi. And when you think of the fact that he got himself an Oscar nomination and he's also in the super sexy Wuthering Heights, he might have queued himself up perfectly to play James Bond. I wonder if that was intentional or just very lucky. With shows, His and Hers is number 1 for the 3rd straight week. Agatha Christie is still a strong IP, and live events continue to perform well for Netflix. Stranger Things is fading away, right? Mid-January. With only Stranger Things 5 and 4 still in the top 10. And again, we'll see what the reaction is to that trailer for the spinoff tomorrow. With digital on Apple's charts, Zootopia 2 is truly that movie. It's number 1 here, and it's still doing well in theaters. But of course, Disney movies typically struggle a little bit on digital because Disney Plus has so many subscribers and people know it will soon be there at no extra cost. Although Disney has very concrete windows. You're going to have to wait 3 months to get it on digital. Then you're going to have to wait another month for it to go on Disney Plus. they don't rush it. And so therefore they're making a lot of money doing that. Again, as I said, rules and order do have their place, particularly when it comes to making money. All right, there was a flood of movies that only did okay in theaters that all hit digital at once, and they're all doing pretty good on digital, right? Also, animated Bible movie David is doing very well on digital, just as it did in theaters, and we'll see how that performs when more religious holidays roll around, particularly the upcoming Easter. And it's very touching to see people watching Best in Show in the wake of Catherine O'Hara's passing. What's your favorite Catherine O'Hara movie or series? I got to go with Home Alone. That's the classic in my opinion. But I did love her so much on The Studio, and I think it's heartbreaking that she died in the middle of production on season 2. That's gonna, they've had to cancel a lot of things going on with that second season. I think it's almost like when Heath Ledger passed away for The Dark Knight. It's really shocking. But then also I've been enjoying so many of the clips from Schitt's Creek. I think she really did wonderful work there. I know that some people have said, well, that's not her most famous work. Let's not get carried away. But I do think that's the work where she was spotlighted the most. And I think that made a big difference. But again, what's your favorite movie or show from Catherine O'Hara? Then for this coming weekend, as I said, we've got quite the bookends. On Friday, it's the Winter Olympics opening ceremony. And then on Sunday, a week from today, it's the Super Bowl, which means, for movie fans, lots and lots of trailers. I will be covering. I hope that we have some really good ones. So yeah, though, only small movies looking to maybe counter-program those events are going to bother to open. So there's no traditional Hollywood fare. But for some of you, maybe that's ideal. We've got Angel Studios rom-com Solo Mio with their biggest established star yet, Kevin James. Horror movie The Strangers Chapter 3. I think that last one really was horrible and I think hurt the franchise. And then Luc Besson's very European take on Dracula. Although his star, I believe, is American. I don't know why he likes this actor so much, but he sure does. And then Pillion, co-starring Alexander Skarsgård, who just hosted Saturday Night Live last night, and a now very grown-up Harry Melling from the Harry Potter movies. On digital on Tuesday, although I have to say, Pillion's done a very good job on the public eye, and so I'm curious to see how it does in theaters. All right, on digital on Tuesday, again, as I said, Marty Supreme and The Housemaid drop, both excellent movies in very different ways, obviously, but I don't think you can go wrong with either one. The Housemaid, very spicy. Just keep that in mind. Definitely not family viewing. All right. So, and then with shows, The Muppet Show, which is I don't know. It plays at 9 p.m. on ABC, which I think is a very telling time to drop. And Seth Rogen is known for skewing adult in his own content. And he's producing and having a small role. But that will be available on ABC at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and also, of course, on Disney+. And then The Lincoln Lawyer returns to Netflix on Thursday. Well, of course, tonight, it's the Grammys on CBS. Speaking of trailers, The Devil Wears Prada 2 will debut its first full trailer tonight. And once again, the show is hosted by Trevor Noah with some very big names set to perform. And that's this week's Movie Math. What have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? And if Hollywood has lost you, can they still maybe win you back? And if so, as I said, how can they do that? Share those thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.